Assalamu alaikum, this is Barack Obama. I'm headed to late night, baby. That's right. We're at phase 2 of the retirement plan to seep Sharia into America and take back civilization from the corroded white race. And you'll find me every night at 11:30 p.m. on the relaunched WB. We'll have in-depth conversations with great scientists like Dr. Shabazz Hamed X on why new research proves the Yacubian theory of the pig-grafted nature of the white race. You're not going to want to miss these conversations. Entertainment from Public Enemy Part 2. It's a new group we're putting together. Plus real-life footage of some of the first white-only FEMA camps still being secretly constructed in Saudi Arabia. New travel segments. We're going to go to Iran. We're going to go to Mecca. We're going to behead some people in Pakistan, baby. We're going to suicide bomb-making factories. Plus conversations with some of the top terrorist leaders in the world. It's all that and more on the relaunched WB, the Barack Obama Show. Allahu Akbar. I hate every drop of white blood in me.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live in Brooklyn. I'm Michael Brooks, along with super producer Matt Leck. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Michael.
Super producer David Slavic out of studio, holding it all down. Hello to everybody in the Twitter world. Hello to everybody on the Discord chat, part of our patron crew on today's program. Briahna Joy Gray. She's going to be joining us later to talk about her piece in Current Affairs, How Identity Became a Weapon Against the Left. We're going to be talking about pseudo-intersectionality and how to synthesize dealing with the inequality crisis with a critique of structural racism and sexism while we take aim at the pseudo-woke neoliberal center. Plus, we are going to be debuting a new segment called Retire, Bitch. And we're going to be focusing on one particular person that needs to retire urgently. A zombie idea of a unity ticket which never goes away. An obscene story about ICE continuing border checkpoints even as Hurricane Harvey will most likely hit Texas incredibly strongly and ruthlessly, putting immigrants' lives at risk. And we also have sound that definitively proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Donald Trump is gone, if he ever was, of this world. And Islamophobia in Australia. Find out who I throw in the pyramid. All that and so much more on the public version of today's program. That's before we get to the post game. Take your calls, NIMs. And Briahna is going to be with me the whole time. Plus your story picks from Discord. But we need to start with a zombie idea that will not die. And that zombie idea is that there is a unity ticket between two preferably wealthy, quote-unquote, centrist, read center-right, traditional conservative, white male Republican or quasi-democratic candidates that can come together in unity between elite class interests, which a dollop of fake social moderation, and save this country from politics. And the answers are usually always austerity, deregulating corporations, giving the 1% what they want. And the latest iteration of this idea dropped today on Friday, August 25th, when we were recording this. We're broadcasting it for you watching or listening live. There is a rumor that Ohio Governor John Kasich, who flailed his arms and occasionally said some slightly moderate things while running for president in the insanely vindictive, bizarre netherworld of the 2016 Republican primary, and Colorado Democratic Governor John Hickenlooper, who is a pro-fracking, center-right leading governor, are considering a 2020 unity ticket. Now, couple things here out of the gate that, of course, are not surprising at all. One, of course, Kasich will have the top of the ticket because obviously being a weak pseudo-centrist, right-leaning Democrat. Hickenlooper, of course, is going to immediately cede the primary power to Kasich, obviously. So this unity ticket already starts with a far right-wing governor, because let's not forget, yes, Kasich supported the Medicaid expansion under Obamacare. He has occasionally said things that would maybe lead one to think that he acknowledges that poor people exist and it maybe should be helped versus sort of like publicly fed to wolves. But this is a guy that cut and gutted Planned Parenthood. He is a strong opponent of public sector unions. He is, in fact, going back to the Gingrich Congress in the 1990s, a advocate of top-end tax giveaways, and really one of the architects of the rightward drift of America. And in between his time in Congress and being governor, he had stints on Wall Street and Fox News. In no rational world is John Kasich anything other but an extreme far-right Republican. John Hickenlooper is a fracking advocate. He has never proposed anything bold or innovative or strong to counteract crises in terms of inequality or the environment. But this idea will never die. In 2012, there was the no labels fantasy. All too much of the quote-unquote resistance discourse just simply gets reduced to a basic and obvious human understanding that, of course, Donald Trump is a dangerous and disgusting human being, but not a structural critique of the system and why we must change it. Now, there's very little public appetite in the country for a center-right civility unity ticket, but there is always a big appetite for it in the corporate donors and green rooms of cable news, which is why, just as the Mike Bloomberg fantasy had traction, just as why no labels got an extraordinary amount of money and ferreted around John Huntsman and Joe Lieberman to talk right-wing dull nonsense, this story will get traction and it will get interest with all of the elites, the chattering classes, and the corporate donors, but of course, no normal voters. And the other reason that this really matters is because, say, we as Democrats are able to actually nominate an actual progressive. Say Bernie Sanders is the 2020 nominee for the Democratic Party. We overcome the elite structure and the money base of the Democratic Party, and we elect a genuine center-left candidate like Bernie Sanders. Do you think that the plutocrats in this country who have jeopardized every aspect of our economy, culture, safety net, environment, and every other facet of American life, do you think, despite their high-minded rhetoric, that they will unite with a genuine left-wing challenger to the Trump regime or whatever Republicans have put in place to continue their reckless agenda? Of course not. You saw Mike Bloomberg reversing himself a couple of months ago from all of his heated rhetoric against Donald Trump and saying he wanted the president to succeed. I doubt very much that Mike Bloomberg would ever say he would want a president that would implement a genuinely progressive tax code to succeed. So it's funny. It's a good case study of the insularity and delusion of the establishment, but it's also a danger for those of us that need to and recognize the urgent necessity of electing an actual progressive to govern this country and save us in the 21st century. And that is why it matters. Now, I'm going to do a brief piece of just sort of housekeeping, or it's not even housekeeping. It's basically just, what is this, Matt? Is this promotion?
Yeah, this is shameless promotion.
This is shameless promotion.
There's something up with my does my mic sound weird to you?
It doesn't sound weird to me. Why?
Oh, it might be my headphones. Never mind.
Really? Okay. No, it sounds fine to me. So, first and foremost, I want to thank, we now have 580 patrons. This is incredible. This is allowing us to do the public show. This is allowing us to do those idea primers. I don't hear the music if you're playing it. This is allowing us to do those idea primers, the third way, Turkey's neo-right-wing social media strategy. And this weekend, Corey Pine and I are doing a deep dive on Silicon Valley fascism. Next week, a bonus interview with Steve Cook on the lobbying inside Washington that surrounds the Gulf crisis with Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And we also break down the doubling down of insanity with a new troop surge in Afghanistan. There's also starting next week going to be a daily brief for patrons as well. Plus, you get the post game, which is a lot of fun. Last week, Sam Sachs was in studio. We broke down Steve Bannon. You got to hear my Pod Save America impressions. So look, for a Brooksy, that's $8 a month. You get all 3 shows. You get access to the Discord. You get the daily briefs that we're starting. For a Comrade level of $21 a month, you also get a monthly phone call with me in addition to everything else. Show crew. You get all of the premium content plus a custom impersonation, phone call, voicemail, whatever you want. And, we're doing a lot to build out. We're still working with an animator. There's a lot of stuff that we have in the pipeline to build out and sustain and expand even beyond what we've done out of the gate. Now, really quickly, for getting new eyeballs, new ears on the show, tell everybody about the YouTube channel and then write us a review on iTunes. I have a beef with the 91st review that we've gotten. I can't go too hard on this review because this is apparently a patron, but I do want responses to it. 4 stars. And by the way, this is like one of 2. We had 91 reviews and we have like 89 5-star reviews right out of the gate. I'm feeling a little salty about this. And Cheese Lady writes, love the primers. That's the third way, the Silicon Valley fascism. So she is indicating that she is a patron. Just a few issues with the program. The calls are mostly the same guys. Yes, mostly guys, young guys who call into the Majority Report. Okay, I'll cede that one. I want everybody who's calling in to keep calling in, but I want new people to call in as well. And you know who you are. There's plenty of people out there who are starting fresh on this. Also, do not say nuclear. She doesn't appreciate the way I say nuclear, to which I say sorry, not sorry. And this is where I think the iTunes reviews need to have a strong response. What the hell is wrong with you? She says, right-wing Mandela is overrated. Get the fuck out of here. That one has been exhausted. I expect to see at least 10 5-star iTunes reviews talking about how great right-wing Mandela is. Your Rachel Maddow needs work, but your Susan Collins is great. Well, thanks for being a patron, Cheese Lady. But we're going to need some heavy responses to you. And again, really thank you everybody who's supported the show this way and sharing it and getting the word out. Speaking of this sort of third way centrist madness that we have been engulfed by, I predicted, and just give me 1 second before we get to that great music. So I said during the French election that it was, in the first round, I would have voted for Harman, who I thought was a genuine social democrat. And I certainly preferred Mélenchon overall to Macron, obviously. And I obviously preferred all 3 of them to Le Pen, who's a neo-fascist. And then I said, unfortunately, look, in the runoff, we need to be reality-based. And just as we needed to, in my view, support Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump, we obviously needed to support Emmanuel Macron over Marie Le Pen. He won, but I did say at the same time, he is going to be extraordinarily unpopular. His poll numbers will plummet. The austerity agenda, the attacks on the French social model are not going to go down well. And if the Socialist Party or if Mélenchon's party are not centered into French politics with a for real robust restoration and continuity of a serious 21st century social democratic model, then fascism still lurks in France. And this is the political dynamic we see in today's world. But, of course, the people like in our mediocre center, they clung to him like a Adonis that they were grabbing onto, but really it was all a mirage, and his poll numbers have plummeted even faster than I would have predicted. And now we have a new Emmanuel Macron scandal. And that is, now I am ready for the stereotypical French music. Emmanuel Macron, who has said that he wanted to be Jupiter-like and restore the honor and the presidency to the French, and also that he wanted France to be a startup nation. And by the way, he's only 39 years old. Has been busted for spending $30,000 on makeup. I'm going to read that again. Macron spends, this is a full CNN headline. Macron spends $30,000 on makeup as policies stall. $30,000 on makeup, you ask? Well, I'm going to read now from CNN. There's no covering this up. Governing is hard. Emmanuel Macron, who's been president of France for just over 100 days, has been ensnared in yet another controversy after the magazine Le Pint reported that he had already racked up a bill of 26,000 euros or $30,700. His representative said the spending was a result of a quote-unquote emergency situation and that future makeup costs would drop significantly. However, the episode underscores the risks facing Macron, a newcomer who was elected to office, who built a political movement around the promise of remaking France's economy. A summer of scandals has caused his popularity to tank and jeopardized his, and I'm going to use air quotes here, reform agenda. And now I'm skipping ahead. This is faster than I predicted. Macron's approval rating has plummeted from 62% after he was elected to 36%, according to a recent poll conducted by IFOP for the newspaper Le Figaro. His predecessor, François Hollande, had an approval rating of 46% at the same point of his presidency. Even worse, only 23% think of Macron as changing the country for the better. And there we have it. Yeah. Oh, I totally knew that timing was happening. I just need to find my show grid. We will actually just take a brief interlude here and take just one phone call. We don't plan these, but sometimes if you drop in to the top half of the show, you can sneak in. And then we have some Donald Trump sound, which really is just sort of extraordinary. But I will take this. You're calling from a 832 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Josh, formerly from Houston, now in Dallas because I like Wi-Fi and running water. So.
Oh, okay. They don't have
yeah,
Wi-Fi.
Kind of. No.
Oh, right.
In a few hours.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Giant hurricane's about to hit us.
Yeah. Tell me what's happening there.
So the flight here was really interesting. So I'm sitting behind. I splurged and got early boarding on a Southwest flight, and I'm sitting behind a man who seems really, really familiar. And after Googling his face to make sure and listening to some sound of his voice to confirm, I realized that I am sitting directly behind Darrell Issa.
Darrell Issa? He's in Texas.
Yes.
Okay.
California representative.
California, the congressman. What is he doing there?
Yes. I think it was for some energy conference, of course.
Sounds about right.
So if this was any other situation, I probably just would have yelled at him, left his best, and ran away. But since I'm on a plane, I can't exactly do that.
Left his best, smash the fash, hashtag TMBS. Right.
Yes, but instead I asked him, hey, can we talk a little bit? And for the duration of an hour, I spent an hour talking to Darrell Issa.
Did you book him for my show?
I unfortunately did not.
Oh, man. So what did you find out? That's interesting. Go ahead.
So he believes that in terms of the debt ceiling, that Congress will pass another continuing resolution through December, just to stall it off a little bit more.
He thinks that, huh?
But then we got into a little bit back and forth over the Electoral College. He was like, "Oh, so do you not believe in states' rights?" And my response to him was, "Do you not believe in voters' rights?"
Right.
And so that kind of was he was like, "Oh, so why are you against it?" And he made this point that America's like a republic and not a democracy, and the direct vote doesn't matter. And I said, well, technically, the reason Donald Trump is president is that the popular vote in 3 states got him there.
Right.
So it's this weird system where he was like, well, we don't need to have a popular vote system. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that. But 48 states do that. So it's kind of moot.
So is there anything else that's cool? I mean, I guess credit where credit is due. If I would have made some type of passing joke about perhaps a history in the car theft racket, I'm not
Oh, my
saying
God.
anything, but I would look up a New Yorker article about Darrell Issa that has a very interesting history about how this guy made his money. There is
It's
a
good.
very interesting
Sorry,
circumstantial evidence about this guy's, I will say, genuine entrepreneurship. But definitely worth
No,
reading.
so
Hey, I
I did
appreciate. And
did
you're
manage to-
you're safe and sound. I mean, do you have? I got to jump in like 30 seconds, but do you have anything specifically about the storm, though?
No, it's just about to hit Houston. But no, the most important part is, so I kind of get a little debate, a little bit back and forth. Two things. He recommended for me to read Atlas Shrugged. It was very hard for me not to throw my backpack at him.
Did you laugh? Did you say I read Dianetics and it's better?
No, I did not. But I did get a
Okay.
joke. I did get a joke in. So he mentioned that he wanted to get out of Houston because the hurricane was coming, and I said, why would you fly away from the hurricane? You can just climb on top of a building and hide from it.
I appreciate the call, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. I just want to actually touch on this briefly, and hopefully, if you were watching this live, we'll find out. If you're listening to this later on Patreon, iTunes, or watching on YouTube, hopefully this storm will not cause the type of damage that it could very well cause. But this is an important story I wanted to flag, and sort of this week's sort of highlight of grotesque inhumanity with regard to immigration reform enforcement. Alex Emmons wrote a piece in The Intercept. Border Patrol checkpoints in Texas will stay open as hurricane evacuation is underway. As evacuations are underway for Hurricane Harvey, the Border Patrol is continuing to operate its immigration checkpoints, forcing undocumented immigrants to choose between staying put and trying to withstand a hurricane or risking deportation. The hurricane is expected to be the most powerful storm to land in 12 years, and other counties near the southern coast in Texas have ordered thousands of residents to leave, according to NBC. Jim Burns, a spokesperson for the Customs and Borders Protection, told The Intercept that the U.S. Border Patrol will check points in the path of Hurricane Harvey in Texas will close as the state highway closes. So in other words, as long as the highways are functional for evacuation, the border will operate checkpoints. This is going to put many lives in jeopardy. And in the past, certainly the Obama administration made adjustments in similar situations. This is the grotesque and disgusting and sustained result of this administration's ICE policies and assault on immigrants. And now we have sound of Donald Trump. And, Matt, a lot of people have picked through this speech. This was, of course, the meltdown that Trump had in Arizona.
Meltdown 16.0.
Right. Let's take a minute on this. At what point, I mean, when you look at mainstream media, there is this incredible delusional sort of pinball effect where it's like, Maggie Haberman at the New York Times says, during Trump's abysmal Afghanistan speech where he just basically, in his own information-free way, doubled down on 16 years of failure and threatened Pakistan. And she took his one line about the United States we're not imperialists or something to that effect, and said, this is him at his strongest. Like as if, just this incredible sort of...
Well, transparent beat sweetener, too.
Transparent beat sweetener and relentless refusal to acknowledge reality. And then on the other hand, I feel like these same contingent of people are continuously surprised when he comes back out and reconfirms again and again and again and again, like, I'm crazy, I'm insane, I sympathize with Nazis, I have no relationship with the terrestrial world, I have bizarre desires for my daughter, I see that this office is basically a personal vanity project. We know all of this. So at any rate, if you were, had any functioning awareness, nothing about what he did in Arizona was surprising except for this. Matt, super producer Matt, found a moment in this speech where Donald Trump's disconnect from reality really clearly has just gone up to a completely different level. This is terrifying.
Obstruct. That's all they do. Their word is we resist. They don't resist. They obstruct. It's all they're good at. It's all they're good at. That's all they do. On health care, they have 48 Democrats. We got no votes. We got no votes. And it would have been great health care. And by the way, would have been great health care for Arizona. Would have been great. So the Democrats have no ideas, no policy, no vision for the country, other than total socialism, and maybe, frankly, a step beyond socialism from what I'm seeing.
So the Democratic Party, of which Nancy Pelosi cannot even come on record and say that she supports single payer. She can't even respond to a question from a college student who's excited about democratic socialism, about the inherent problems with capitalism, with anything other than a sort of like weird, vague praise of how corporations operated in the 60s.
And affirmation of their capitalist values.
And affirmation that the Democrats are capitalists. Trump goes out and like, maybe it's even further.
I know the stages of socialism. I know what comes next.
What comes next is because Christine Gillibrand is a Fabian, and Crazy Bernie's a Marxist, and Chuck Schumer, he's sort of a Leninist vanguardist in a
Keith
certain
Ellison's
sense.
a Muslim.
Keith Ellison's a Muslim, which is obviously the same thing. I mean, but this is what it is, right? This is when you have, like, that is the mind meld, though, that Donald Trump has with his audience, which is another thing that I think people are still getting their heads around, right? Like, that he is literally those people. He is the crazy guy watching Alex Jones. He is the information-free moron who watches Fox.
He's the Fox News viewer, not pundit.
He is the Fox News viewer, not pundit. And it also, I mean, not to bring up, like, relitigate anything, but, like, why did the Clintons hang out with this guy? Right? Like, what was appealing about this panting, buffoonish racist to the elites of our society? Why was he on Meet the Press? Why was he on Charlie Rose? I mean, Donald Trump is the perfect petri dish for everything wrong about who we are. And everything that touches him should immediately be tainted and done on association. And now I admit that was not a very nice thing for me to say. And this leads us to we're going to be experimenting with several new segments over the next couple of shows. And some people might object to the name of this segment, which is Retire Bitch. And look, if it bothers enough people, we might change the segment if those people who are complaining about it become patrons, because I am totally bribable. You can bribe me into political correctness any day, or out of it. We could do like a bidding war. But it actually came from Danny DeVito, who I'm a fan of. And Danny DeVito, I don't remember the exact date, but he quote tweeted Antonin Scalia, a story about Antonin Scalia before Scalia passed away. And he wrote, "Retire, bitch." And I think that there was a lot of truth in Danny DeVito's tweet, and it just applies to almost anybody that we could think of in public life. But I wanted to do a person that probably, and also these are people that I don't know, Matt, can we commit 100%? Like, we almost certainly will never talk about these people again.
Unless they like go on a shooting spree or something.
Unless they go on like a shooting spree.
Which with some of them, it's possible.
With some of them, it's totally possible. So like as an example, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we have to talk about Stephen Miller even before he does that because he's in a policy-making position.
Well, that's why we can't tell him
Right.
to retire, bitch, because we're not ready to retire him.
Exactly. But these people, and so Michael Kinsley is a guy that I'm not particularly familiar with, but I have heard the name. He's edited at Slate. He's was also a guy who was on Crossfire back in the day on CNN. And, you could say, look, this guy's not in the center of any kind of public conversation. He's pretty irrelevant. And that's true. But he does still get New York Times real estate. He does still get Vanity Fair real estate. And I just noticed this recently. Somebody flagged this. It was part of a recent article in Current Affairs that critiqued false civility. And I missed this at the time. And it is so atrocious and so breathtakingly stupid that even if Mike Kinsley apologized for this, which he has not, as far as I know, he would need to like fly to the birthplace of the Buddha, meditate under the Bodhi tree, and then retrace like Jesus' steps in the desert, then go on a Hajj, then do a sweat. Like he would need to do every type of purification and penance imaginable to make up for this column that he did in the New York Times. And I'm going to quote now from, this is a piece in Current Affairs. We'll have a link in the show notes. In May, this is May, a couple of months ago, the paper, which is the New York Times, began running a nauseating column called Say Something Nice About Donald Trump, in which the president would be praised semi-weekly by career pundit Michael Kinsley. Kinsley, whose prior resume spans the worst entities in political media, see Slate, The New Republic, CNN's Crossfire, began his first column with a plea to be nicer to Trump. Does he deserve all of the criticism? Does he never do anything right? Say anything wise? Are all of his schemes to reform this agency or abolish that regulation utterly misguided? The venom, the obsession, the knife twisting are hard to understand. Even a stop clock is right twice a day. And though even Donald Trump can't be wrong all the time, we're looking for a few positive words about the president. We're asking for your help. This is not about Trump the family man. It's not another forum for debating the issues. It's a place to point out positive things that Mr. Trump has said or done from the viewpoint of the New York Times and its readers. I don't know if this is still going on. I could not find recent editions of this column, and maybe it was quietly killed from shame and delusion. This is a way, it's a door into the generations of pundits that first sort of define that neoliberal center. And it was people like Michael Kinsley that helped get us into such a state of delusion and learned helplessness within the Democratic elite, because those were the two tracks with the Democratic elite. There was the selling out of the core Democratic constituencies, whether they're labor or poor people or people of color under the Clinton era, to curry favorable corporations, to throw people off of welfare and all the rest of it. No question. But then there was this bizarre obsession with civility and institutional respect and finding fairness and equivalencies where none exist. And you can see a through line, quite literally a direct through line, with a column idea as stupid as this by Kinsley, with the same people that look at the world as it is today and are more worried by Antifa than anything else. It's this bizarre desire to find something that isn't there, when one, practically the right, would still just as easily call Michael Kinsley a communist and never reciprocate this kind of weakness and delusion. And then an order of affairs that favors power, privilege, and oppression. And that's, you know, and I think it was Marcuse who was quoted in this piece from the Frankfurt School, said, can you really have an open exchange and a commitment to broad openness of ideas that allows for everybody when one side is advocating for civil rights, the other side is advocating white supremacy in the Ku Klux Klan? And maybe in a generic, broad sense, everybody can sort of say what they want. But from a broad societal functional sense, in terms of what we accept and what we prop, obviously both of those things cannot be given equal airing, because one is a demand for rights and space and the other is a negation of it. And that's how this discourse gets so warped and abused. And you'll see even this weekend in the Silicon Valley fascism primer, going back to the 70s, of people talking about the real danger and the real lesson of Hitler's Germany was not a genocidal quest to murder all Jewish people, to murder all gypsies. No. That wasn't the issue. The issue was there wasn't free speech in Hitler's Germany. And that clamped down on, I kid you not, open exchanges of ideas. So in this column, even though we missed it at the time, Michael Kinsley has given himself a permanent pay stub to retire, bitch, forever. Send us your tweets. Send us your thoughts. If enough people become patrons who object to the name of that, we'll change it to something else. There's also past your sell-by date. There's also, oh my God, please put us out of our misery. What are some other ones we're thinking about for that segment, Matt? There was a few others.
I don't know. I think leave forever.
Leave forever.
Or, I don't know.
Goodbye. Please, Jesus Christ, just go.
Fuck you forever, maybe.
Fuck you forever. We're actually going to continue on the fuck you forever beat and get to another piece of sort of neoliberal whinging, and that is Mark Lilla. And every week, I want to just say there's a couple of other segments that we're considering integrating as regular features in both the public show and the post game. And another one that we're working on is going to be there's a sort of serious one that we're focusing on that would probably just be a regular documenting of things like civilian casualties and sort of areas of kinetic activity, whether they're in Yemen or Somalia, or certainly even like the Saudi travesty that the United States and the UK are backing right now in Yemen, which if Syria wasn't sucking up so much oxygen would be absolutely understood as the sort of preeminent human rights crisis in the world today. Steve Cook and I went in depth on that in our interview. And then another called the shockingly woke moment in TV of the week. There's a couple of these that we're going to be experimenting with on both regular show and post game. But one that we will be continuing to do and is very important in light of today's show, because Briahna and I are going to be talking about how pseudo-wokeness is used as a weapon to undermine a serious conversation and a serious approach to inequality. But there was another response to the travesty of Trump being elected, and that leads us to this week's pyramid. Every week, we need to lock somebody away. Somebody who has either abused the public trust, been a massive asshole, just a terrible person, or made a bad argument. And this week's pyramid is a bad argument by a professor named Mark Lilla, who teaches humanities at Columbia University and is author of a new book called The Once and Future Liberal, After Identity Politics. Mark Lilla wrote in the New York Times after the election of Donald Trump, "The fixation on diversity in our schools and in our press has produced a generation of liberals and progressives narcissistically unaware of the conditions outside of their self-defined groups and indifferent to the task of reaching out to Americans in every walk of life. At a very young age, our children are being encouraged to talk about their individual identities even before they have them. By the time they reach college, many assume that diversity discourse exhausts political discourse and have shockingly little to say about such perennial questions as class, war, the economy, and the common good." And he said recently, upon the release of his book, that by the 1980s, identity politics had given way to a pseudo-politics of self-regard and increasingly narrow exclusionary self-definition that is now cultivated in colleges and universities. The main result, he writes, has been to turn young people back into themselves rather than turning them outward toward the wider world. Now, this might sound like something that people like us would say because we want to reorient a Marxist analysis and a serious class assessment into politics. But all Lilla is really doing here, by belittling the struggles for social emancipation and grossly inflating the importance of silly college campus fantasies, is playing into the types of politics that Bill Clinton deployed in the 1990s when he was doing things like the Sister Soldier moment with Jesse Jackson, where he shared a platform with Jackson and publicly humiliated him, where Democrats triangulated on race and gender issues. There's no contradiction between rhetorically speaking to and attesting to social emancipation and synthesizing it with a broader message. Barack Obama actually did this very well rhetorically. He just didn't match it with the kind of robust, for real left politics we need. So Lilla is not doing what we're doing on this show. He's just being a grouchy, out of touch professor who's inflating his narrow read of the election and his own complaints about his relatively irrelevant campus culture with a national crisis that includes issues such as inequality and race. And that is why Mark Lilla is in the pyramid this week. To the pyramid, which is not a safe space for you, Mark Lilla. Did you ever read that guy's columns?
That guy's columns?
Or
that
any
was
of
the
them?
first
Did you read,
one.
Yeah, that was the first one.
I ever heard of, really.
Did you read that one?
No, but I saw it shared and kind of gave people a bit of a side eye because I felt like it was maybe the first thing they ever engaged with on identity politics. And it is something that, you know, despite having a critique as we're about to give on it, it's something that you can tell when people are a bit too quick to dismiss it, where they're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, he quoted in his original piece, he kind of said, you know, he even the way he framed, like he said, Black Lives Matter has put issues on the table that every American of conscience could consider and reflect, or, you know, something to that effect. Every American would care about. But the notion that a structural issue, which also can totally be read through a class lens, because you can also go into the statistics on terms of, you know, it's primarily race, but it's also very much class distributed, and some of the highest police brutality states are very racially homogenous. So it is certainly an intersectional issue in that sense. It's race and class very much connected. But the way where he just sort of notates it as like, yeah, and there's this nice thing going on with Black Lives Matter, as if it's ancillary. See, that's the sort of distinction. What we're arguing for is both and everything to synthesize and expand so that we're addressing the crises at once. And that's a messy process. It's a challenging process. And sometimes it will take the argument that I will make. I really do center class. I could be right, I could be wrong. But what he's doing is he's sort of subtly shifting out like, okay, look, black people are along for the ride, gay people are along for the ride, but now we need to get back to this sort of mushy national discourse. And what is the default in mushy national discourse? I think we all know the answer. Now, we are going to talk with Briahna in just a few minutes. She's on her way up. But before that, I'm very pleased to announce that in addition to his contributions on the Majority Report with Samantha Cedar, Right Wing Mandela has agreed to do some cross-promotion with us. The origin story of Right Wing Mandela, for people new to the show, to the Michael Brooks Show, is this. A couple of years ago, when Nelson Mandela, who really sort of kind of like last unequivocal heroes that we sort of had on Earth, passed away, we were in the office, and the first joke was that Chris Matthews had been begging Obama to give him an interview, and Mandela passed away, and so they preempted his interview. So it was sort of like Mandela being like, "Ha ha, Chris, you got cocked." And that was sort of funny and whatever. Honestly, just probably joking around because it was so depressing, to be honest. It was quite depressing for me. And then Rick Santorum went on Bill O'Reilly and compared the struggle against Obamacare to the struggle against apartheid, which still is up there in a Donald Trump world as one of the most obscenely stupid things I've ever heard in my life. But it did give birth to, Rick is quite right. We were struggling against subsidized health care for mine workers in the African mines. So that is the origin for those that have been asking me. And without further ado, earlier today, right-wing Mandela, or Mandela, I should say, right-wing Mandela had a really heated, probably more heated on his side, but very interesting exploration of comedy, political correctness, race, Judaism, terrorism, and Islam with comedian Andy Kindler. No, I don't think that's Mandela's intro music. And he's agreed to allow us to play it. His radio show is going to be appearing, fortunately, on our show from time to time. And here it is, Right-Wing Mandela with Andy Kindler.
But seriously, Andy, we do have some questions to get to. Welcome back to the show. Soon we'll be getting to the cock of the week and also your calls, including Fred in Seattle, whose wife left him for a woman. We'll explain why, all that. Check out my sacred masculinity pills at mandelashow.com/marketplace. But joining us now is a Jew who would not engage in a free and open exchange of ideas if it met him on the street, blew him, and gave him 50 shekels. Comedian and SJW Andy Kindler is with us.
Wow, I don't know. Do you always introduce people by their religion?
Well, usually I find that it's good, and the paranoia about being introduced by a religion is really a form of political correctness that shows that you are the one that would have the problem.
In other words, so is it politically correct that I refer to myself as a Jew, or is it politically correct that I object to being called a Jew?
I would call it politically transparent that you refer to yourself as a Jew. Globe emoji, globe emoji, globe emoji. But seriously, Andy, we do have some questions to get to before you look over your bank account.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Mandela.
Yes.
I did not mean to laugh at you.
No, that's quite. Look, I am not a snowflake. I can accept humor. Let's get to the question.
I love the snowflake. Mr. Mandela, who came up with snowflake?
The snowflake was something that we came up with during the struggle, during apartheid, because what we were doing was objecting to the apartheid regime's practice of safe spaces in the mines. This is really going back to the earliest days of the ANC struggle.
This is not the way I heard the history of it.
Well,
it
has been distorted by the liberal media, and that's Hollywood, and that's Invictus, and it's a travesty, which we correct every day.
Did you have fake news? Did you have fake news where in your
Hashtag fake news. I remember when Oliver Tambo called it fake news. I said, this is a tremendous fucking slogan. But Andy, serious question. You're a comedian. You make a living telling jokes, as do many others of your tribe. But now there are college students who don't like fag and tranny jokes anymore, not to mention great airplane humor as practiced by Jerry Seinfeld, the funniest man in the history of humanity. And I do mean man because, of course, having a woman do a comedy is like having them drive. Bad results. So, in addition to your love of Islam, why do you want politically correctness to choke comedy?
Well, the thing is that I think that's exaggerated by. I think that's part of a propaganda movement. There's nothing wrong. The kids on the college campuses, they're totally progressive, but they're not with this. It's like you're buying into the right wing media.
So
nonsense,
you admit
tabloid.
that the children are progressive and they don't want a free and open exchange of ideas. So in other words, if Charles Murray goes to the college campus and he says the brain sizes is disproportionate with the penis, and look, I'm black, I could say this myself, so therefore there is sexual and brain and cranium types, it's science, the kids don't want to hear it, they shut it down. Jerry Seinfeld goes, he does this fucking amazing routine about a French king eating cupcakes. That's like a gay guy eating cupcakes, fucking dynamite humor. The kids don't like it either, but they should be shut down. Why?
Well, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of I'm telling you, I think you're buying into a lot of exaggerations. I think that, one exaggeration you're buying into. First of all, I don't know if the exaggeration is correct, but Jerry Seinfeld doesn't even play colleges. That's
Yes,
the thing.
because he has been run out by the children. But look, Andy,
No.
getting on to the other topics, I think we already know what's going on right now. If an Islamic terrorist, a member of an Islamic
Right.
group, a terrorist, a Muslim, a terrorist who is practicing Islam by observing their true faith, by being a terrorist, if they were
No,
to...
well, that's not the truth. Okay, all right.
Okay, we
I'll let that slide.
Yeah, let it slide for now. We will stipulate it before you defend your favorite religion in the world. Say that a Islamic terrorist practicing the Islamic faith as described in the Hadiths and in the Quran, I have a thought experiment for you. They were to strap some dynamite and yell and shriek, Allah Akbar, when they blew up the Florida delicatessen retirement home that, say, Babala auntie lived in. Would your
Okay.
first reaction be to apologize to the suicide bomber? Or since he was dead and you couldn't apologize to him, perhaps send out a tweet to CARE saying we should let Muslims build a mosque on the Washington Monument? What would your first response be?
Okay, well, first of all, I would check on my aunt Bubba, my aunt who's ever in the home.
Bubba.
I would see who is it? Delicatessen.
Yes, delicatessen retirement home.
I would find, first I would tend to the first responders, but then once I recovered, I would say, I understand. Well, is he still alive or is he dead?
Well, he
The
is
suicide
dead, but
bomber.
you might want to apologize to probably the leader of his group or something like that.
Yes, I
assume
would say the
if
leader of his
Baghdadi
group,
is still
I don't-
alive, you would like to apologize to him.
I would just say, look, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't agree with your tactics.
Well-
No one's tried that.
Well,
A reasonable route.
At least, Andy, if you are nothing if not honest about your SJW-tude, but it is obviously your attitude, which is destroying comedy, destroying Western civilization, and going to lead us into a gay Islamic apocalypse. But we're running out of time. You have the final word.
Well, the thing is, a lot of people don't. There's a big difference
Andy
between
Kinder,
comedy.
everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Mandela Show. You had the final word. Thank you so much.
Come on, Mr. Mandela. I am outraged that you would not let me give me a proper forum within which to respond.
Well, you can join us again, perhaps after I get an estrogen injection from Sam Cedar or Larry Murphy drags himself out of a Bob's Burgers recording, or Eugene Merman has the balls to face me in a free and open forum. None of you are as funny as Jerry Seinfeld, and I'm like Gavin McGinnis. Fuck you forever. It's fine. No more friends for me.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, though, Mr. Mandela.
Thank you, Andy.
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. That was from Right Wing Mandela's new radio program, interview with Andy Kindler. Briahna actually wrote the script for that, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Anytime.
Joining us now is Briahna Joy Gray. She is a writer, analyst, host of what's the name of your podcast again?
Someone's Wrong on the Internet, SWOTY.
SWOTY, Someone's Wrong on the Internet. That's true. I like how you named your podcast after a truism.
Yeah.
She's going to be hanging out with us through the rest of the public show and into the post game. But we have to start with a piece that you wrote for Current Affairs called How Identity Became a Weapon Against the Left. Make the case. I mean, this is a very receptive place to make the case, but you outlined it, I think, in a way, to sort of set the table a little bit. I think that in some ways there's a lot of things that get conflated in this debate. There's actually a high-level debate that I think, if it was actually taking place, would be a really worthwhile one. which is kind of like a Marxist versus intersectional debate. And what do we center and what do we value and how do we synthesize? And then I think there's an emotional intelligence debate. There's some people that I totally agree with analytically, but the way they talk and the way they address certain issues, it's like, whoa,
Yeah, sure.
you're absolutely just not communicating with awareness, right? And then there's like a tremendous amount of political opportunism and cynicism. And I think that you hit these threads really well. So why don't you outline the piece and we'll break it down and move from there.
So basically, I felt compelled to write this or some version of it since the months leading up to the election, where I was met with a lot of incredulity every time that someone became aware that I was in fact a black leftist.
Right.
And this often happens on Twitter, where despite one's avatar, it's easier for people to make presumptions about who you are or who you aren't. And so what you would find is that you would get into ideological disagreements with people, and they would pull the, I mean, I don't want to trivialize it by saying this, but like they would pull a kind of a version of a race card on me. It would usually be a white centrist who would tell me, you could only have those views if you were a privileged white Bernie bro. You must be a 19-year-old living in your mother's basement, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
To which I would say, check out my avatar. And the response I found troublingly was often that they would completely back down. And it would confuse me because my position was I'm right because I'm right, not because I'm not white. So there's this complete and total marriage of political opinion or how much credit you get, how much credibility you have politically with your identity, which even when it benefits me, troubles me greatly, especially as someone who, just as an individual, as a human being, whose identity doesn't always match with, racial expectations, and that's a freedom that, white people have,
Right.
and that other people of color often don't. And it's been kind of exacerbated in this political arena where there's a lot of political gain to be had by leading with identity, which has the effect at times of marginalizing economic arguments. And as someone who is a strong believer in some of the economic arguments that were raised by Sanders with a prominence that we haven't seen in a long time, it was particularly disheartening to see members of my community being swayed by arguments that weaponize their own identity against them.
Right. So, and we'll get to the sort of specific political examples of that, because I think that, the other thing that it also reveals is that the comfort in at least our circles, roughly speaking, which are coastal, educational, broadly, I think one of the things that's actually great now is we really are seeing that, like, we don't have the same politics. There's radically different politics within what people generically call the left. I actually encounter that when I go and do media with, say center-right or centrist people, and they expect me to come with this whole kind of agenda, which I actually probably I agree with, but they expect a whole mode of discourse and way of framing the world, which I don't. And because they've that sort of broader brand of what the left has been so distorted. But there are kind of the two specific examples of how these arguments got deployed. And let's start with just the real nitty-gritty of the cynicism before we get to some of the actual merits on both sides, right? So it was amazing. And, we're probably like roughly-ish the same age. So we didn't exactly we were alive during Bill Clinton, but we probably were not super up on it.
I wasn't in the country for any of the Clinton years.
Oh, wow. Were you so repulsed by Bill Clinton? You're out of the country?
Talked to my mom about it.
Yeah, wow. Okay, got you. Actually, where were you?
We were in Saudi Arabia from...
well, that explains it. There you go. See, this is another part of the Islamic Marxist conspiracy. I'm had again. All Sam Harris trolls, hit us up. You know what it is. You know how hard it is? Like, the commitment that we have to wage jihad, that you're not in a burqa right now, is like amazing.
I brought it with me if you want me to do a quick change.
Well, no, not while we're on the air, because we got to keep...
Here.
Well, it is, but I understand that we're doing deep cover work, so of course. No, I appreciate it. Obviously, once we leave, and I will get appropriately attired as well. But but we know that Bill. The irony is that the Clinton, the first third way kind of DLC model that the Clintons operate out of, which was exemplified in Bill Clinton in 92, actually relatively center lefty on economics when he first ran for president, not as bad on those issues. Terrible on exploiting racial divisions, making sure to, people need to look up Ricky Ray Rector. He went, while he was running for president, and signed the death warrant of a literally mentally lobotomized black man, a guy who, before he was executed, asked what his next meal would be, or rather, he wanted to save some of his final meal for later, right? This was before he was going to get executed. Right. This is Bill Clinton. And then in 1996, to the right on the economy, and then incredibly socially reactionary politics as designed by Dick Morris. And then, so that's, and Hillary Clinton was totally on board for that. So and then in 2008, all sorts of bizarre, there's no doubt that rumors about Obama's heritage and stuff like that had roles in the Clintons' campaign.
Somali garb.
And that's what I will be changing into. So, it was extraordinary with just a tiny sense of political awareness to watch that the Clinton campaign's response to Bernie Sanders' unexpected success was going to be, we are woke. And I knew people on the political spectrum. I knew I was well to their left, but I also was like, they're sophisticated enough that they cannot possibly fall for this, because this is also like, this is somebody who came out for marriage equality 2 years ago, and this is ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, that's what it was. So, get more. And then that leads us to the discourse around Kamala Harris.
Right. So that was the proximate cause of writing this article.
Right.
Because I have felt in the court, like particularly, I feel like irritated by the optimism surrounding her. Partly because I kind of run in a lawyery, liberally, lawyers of color circle that is particularly enthusiastic about her.
Right.
About
Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to law school with her niece. She's been a name that's been in my life for a very long time for other reasons. And what was particularly troubling was that my instinct was to root for her, right? And I hope that comes across in some small way in the article, that I wasn't here to just completely drag her, Right. But when we've just come off of an election like we've had, and we see the Democratic Party lining up behind someone who has so many of the similar failings that ended up tanking Hillary Clinton, when you have someone in a social climate where Black Lives Matter is potentially the most, visible and kind of easily identified movement on the left, to have someone who's a former prosecutor, who spent her career bragging about how many people she can put behind bars, who specifically advocated particular policies that are especially draconian in nature, the criminalization of parents with truant kids. This is the kind of person that we're supposed to all rally behind without even a moment of pause. And what I would hope is that an article like this and criticism of her would lead to her self-evaluating and making some attempt to pivot, do what she can do to try to reevaluate who she is. Because I feel like a lot of politicians in this kind of new Bernie world, where it seems you can maybe do it without all the fundraising, maybe you can do it without all the political compromises that we thought were a matter of course, might make different decisions and might be able to find some integrity buried deep down somewhere. But instead, any criticism is taken as you're racist or you're a sexist, because that is the line that Hillary Clinton really formalized and really specialized in. And that's the mindset that people can't seem to shake.
It was epitomized. And I want to because I really because I've been sort of trying to thread this needle, because I don't think it's productive for people on our side to, I think we should have the confidence to be able to come out and say to somebody like Kamala Harris, who is an appealing political figure in some ways, like, look, we have the blueprint for you. Work with us. We should have the, not be out with this sort of immediate, like, well, fuck her and all of it. I think that's where, people on our side of the equation can get insular and dogmatic, which when it comes to electoral politics is just not how you operate. If I operated like that, I have, Bernie says things about Israel that annoy me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we can all play this game,
Right.
right? I'm not saying an equivalency. Bernie is way more progressive than Kamala Harris, but you know what I'm saying. But I think, just to really underscore, I think one of the moments where the dynamic you're talking about really came alive and was really the formalization of this split was in one of the Democratic debates where Hillary Clinton, in response to, and Bernie's up there working his arms and like, we got to do some Wall Street, and oh man, that fucks my shoulders up even doing that impression. Oof, I got to do some yoga. Maybe he needs to do some yoga. But, he was doing it and he was doing his great spiel. And everybody know, I mean, Wall Street and, those are those like 70, 80% issues. And obviously Donald Trump was able to get some traction on a scam version of telling that same story.
Right.
And she looked back at him and she said, solving Wall Street won't get rid of racism.
Right.
And that was an applause line. And I mean, the multitude of how shockingly stupid and disingenuous that was, it literally took my breath away. Because, first, we start with the obvious, which is that Wall Street running amok has incredibly specific implications for people of color, which I would love for you to elaborate. But then second, it was like, that's the new, like, what is she going to say? Like, I'm not going to sign a new SALT treaty. That won't solve racism. Like, what the fuck? Like, it was, because that to me is the kind of broader thing that also shows up with Kamala Harris. There's this bizarre, like, if Kamala Harris becomes my token of emotional political redemption, that also becomes this extraordinarily bizarre racialized discourse in and of itself. And even there, you're basically saying, like, hey, people of color can't have any policy sets on anything, including, by the way, in that instance, one that does have a disproportionate effect on people of color. But that would be like, why do arms control?
Yeah.
Why sign a new, whatever. Yeah.
Someone on the internet tweeted at me once, oh, you're concerned with economic equality? That's so privileged. It's something that, only a white person would have to deal with.
Can you repeat that again?
I shit you not. Like, economic equality is such a white privileged thing to care about.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
So, yeah, as you've pointed out, first of all, the Wall Street failures disproportionately affected the black community. I think it stole something like 40% of black wealth. Yeah. And black wealth
through
is
home
already...
ownership.
And we're already something like a nickel to a dollar of white family wealth. So you really can't overstate that direct harm. Secondly, as you said, it's like this incredible logical fallacy that curing racism not only should that not be a metric for pursuing any kind of policy, but it's not as though the Democrats are offering any alternative that will cure racism. I've yet to see the DNC's 2020 platform for eliminating all discrimination.
Right. Well, that was the other thing that I wanted you to touch on, and I guess it's emotionally lethargic to relitigate some of this stuff. But I remember when and reparations, like, that's just literally, well, I mean, it's not a conversation we're having now. We can have it. That's fine. But the thing that struck me when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote his critique of Bernie, which I mean, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't overly impressed with it. I thought he had a totally valid point. Maybe I'm enough of a political operative to be like, okay, that's an interesting time to intervene in this primary. Mm-hmm. But what really got me was, like, when you're going to deploy, and just to be clear, Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a column saying Bernie doesn't want to touch reparations because he doesn't think it's politically viable, but every other part of his political message is on challenging what is politically viable. And the one thing I will say operationally is that, I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates is totally right on the merits of what he's saying in terms of the actual argumentation, but I think what Bernie is saying in a kind of more operational sense is expand what is politically viable in terms of issues that you can get 70, 80% of the American population on. And whether we agree with that approach or not, that is what he's talking about. Right. He's not talking about finding more, he's talking about what's an issue set, like everybody has health care, Wall Street stops robbing you of your home, that pretty much everybody who isn't doing the robbing can agree with. But anyways, what struck me was that it's a fine critique, but watching Hillary Clinton's people post, I was like, I didn't see the Marcus Garvey section of Hillary Clinton's campaign website. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like to see these critiques aimed at him from ostensibly the left to aid the right-wing candidate.
It felt like being gaslighted.
Right.
I futilely tweeted at Ta-Nehisi Coates over and over again, imploring him to please, because he said, right, that he very reluctantly admitted that he was going to vote for Sanders, even though he said he wouldn't endorse Sanders. And I was like, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean.
If you're on a public show and you say you're running for somebody, that's an endorsement.
It's an endorsement.
Yeah.
But it was troubling to me because, especially in the world of Twitter, where I know that disagreements can become outsized and disproportionate, there's so many Black Twitter voices that a lot of people were listening to that basically were parroting that same kind of a line. If it doesn't cure racism, it's not worth doing. Anything that is not an explicitly race-first message is an anti-Black, anti-POC, anti-LGBT message, and we shouldn't trust it. And it was fascinating to me because there was this argument that I heard that went along the lines of, after the primary, the majority of Black people voted for Hillary Clinton. Therefore, those who would continue to support Bernie or progressive policies are disenfranchising Black people, right?
Yeah.
So to vote, where that leaves me, I don't know.
Well, you're disenfranchising Black people.
Apparently.
Thank you.
I mean,
as a Bernie bro, I would like to thank you because obviously
it didn't
that's
work.
the sort of origins. I remember reading about like the anti-apartheid struggle and thinking like, is there a way that we could get an old Jew that doesn't want Black people to be empowered? That was the formation of my politics. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I found myself arguing with people trying to get them to engage on a policy level.
Right.
And they refused. Back earlier during the primary, I tried to get people to engage with the idea that just because Hillary Clinton's a woman, it doesn't mean that she's necessarily the best candidate for women.
Right.
And I was, appalled when she picked Tim Kaine as a VP choice, given that he is someone who had a tragic record on women's issues in Virginia, who advocated to get require parental signatures for juveniles who were seeking abortions and abstinence-only education and all the things that if any other white man had kind of allied themselves with, it would have been it.
Do you think that part of this problem is Bernie was the first, major candidate? As far as I understand, maybe, I guess besides potentially in some ways Jerry Brown in 1992 or Jesse Jackson in the 80s, who was running like a decommodified campaign. He was talking about actual material issues, and everything else we've been, even in relatively trivial, primaries, like it's very much a brand preference. Like Howard Dean, I mean, Iraq was important, but like there's no policy portfolio difference between John Kerry or Howard Dean. It's, do you want a guy who kind of mixes it up, or do you want a kind of, taller, more sort of whatever?
Yeah.
And that there is a whole generation of people, of which we are, but somehow we escaped, that is simply trained to just filter politics as a personal brand proposition. So that now with Kamala Harris, because the other thing that's bizarre is like, I have one friend who's totally in this like hyper liberal, identitarian category. But the thing that I appreciate about him is I'm just like, dude, look, like run Barbara Lee. And I would totally strongly consider supporting her, right?
They don't like that.
Well, he does. So to his credit, he's with it and he gets it. But besides that, it's like what is it that why don't they like that? And what is this politics that continues even after the debacle of 16, where it's a brand. So it's like this intense emotionality, but it also feels like I'm debating Puma versus Nike with somebody.
Oh, I thought you were going to bring up Puma as in the Hillary Clinton Pumas.
Oh, no. I wasn't even want to get back to those people. Jesus, man.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember supporting Obama then. And it was really hard because obviously as a sort of young socialist, I didn't want a black president, obviously.
Of course.
But yeah, of course not. But I was, but a woman, I mean, Jesus, I have my limits. So 08 was very hard.
Yeah, I can bet.
Yeah.
It was a tough year.
That was difficult.
Real struggle bus.
Yeah.
What I get from people when alternative, progressive candidates of color are proposed is that it's a pretext. They just don't trust it. Because there was a lot of, oh, I don't like Hillary, but I'm going to vote for Jill Stein, right? And I think that kind of started to make people distrustful because they didn't see Jill Stein as a legitimate candidate. They thought, oh, well, you're only putting her forward because you know that she has no viability.
Right.
And you're just trying to cover the fact that you are a Bernie bro and that you're a sexist.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to see someone respond with any kind of sincerity. So kudos to your friends.
Well, it's hard. I mean, for me, like I voted for Hillary Clinton. I totally was like, look, we're in the general. This is. Oh, you didn't?
I didn't. I live in New York.
Yeah,
I
you
live
can
in the
vote
West
for
Village. Who cares?
You can vote for who you want to vote for in the West Village. But Jill Stein annoyed me a lot.
Yeah, I
but
planned to vote for Jill Stein, but then she annoyed me.
She just said one too many stupid things.
She does
but
say a lot
yeah,
of stupid things.
Yeah.
But she also was the only one who was out here with reparations on her platform. There were some.
Well, that was the real problem I had with her. I couldn't resist that callback. Yeah, no, but that's exactly right. She's the only one, and the argument against her wasn't like, to me, even beyond, like, I do genuinely think she was just like, I got to a point where I had actual problems with her, where I couldn't even have like a pleasant protest vote. But I do think that, like, you know, that yes, this notion. It wasn't just like, hey, look, this isn't electorally viable and it's pretty important to stop clown fascism, vote for Hillary, fuck out of here with Jill Stein. It's this emotional, enraged, like, how dare anybody be, but it's so odd because it's an emotionality that is devoid of policy. It's like I think of, like, I get more in that mode when I'm doing like Jay-Z versus Nas. You know?
I think it's part of the it's her turn phenomena, I think. I think,
right.
for one, there's a great interview with Anoa
Changa.
Yeah.
I had her on. She's part of crew of this show. She's a regular.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
she's brilliant.
I don't know who she was arguing. Somebody hapless and awful. But she did this amazing job basically pushing back. So the person she was arguing with was a kind of a middle-aged white woman.
Right.
And what became really clear in the course of this discussion was how much there was like this generational schism that was contributing to people's inability to see things the same way.
Right.
So that there's this like kind of older white female voter who really did internalize that notion of it's her turn. And I want to give some respect to that because I do understand this whole like Ruth Bader Ginsburg generation, this Gloria Steinem generation, who really can't wrap their mind around things beyond representational politics because they're just in this kind of second wave mode that was legitimate and important at a time.
Right.
But we're in a more third wavy, choose your choices kind of a place. And
we're also in like you're not going to be able to feed yourself because we're in a 21st century feudal late stage capitalism kind of place. And do we really want a politics that ends with, you know, the first openly gay member of the Supreme Court rewrites indentured servitude if you can't pay your student loans.
Right. But people were not receptive to that. And we got Gloria Steinem saying the female women who liked Bernie were just doing it because they wanted to be with the boys. On of all places, the Bill Maher show.
Yeah, right. That was like,
he really brings out the best in people.
That was one of the great. Like, I can't wait to go on Bill Maher and be like, it's because people are fucking irrational about Muslims. You know what I'm saying?
Don't get me on Bill Maher. Yeah. But yeah, so I do think that there was just kind of like a cultural gap where there were people who just really were invested in the symbolism of what was happening and weren't able to shake it. And I try to reflect about how I would have felt in 2008 if there were a more politically aligned non-black candidate.
Right.
Who, it's hard because if you're going to go for representational politics, Obama really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. right.
I mean, he did a really good job just being what did Joe Biden say, the cleanest, most articulate black man that you could find.
Goddamn right. Got that shine.
But I would hope that wouldn't be enough. And as a woman, certainly Hillary Clinton being a woman wasn't enough.
Do you have it? And I think it's very important that we frame this question carefully, and not just because I'm a white guy, but just analytically. Like when we talk about, like the assumption that the black community would be to the left in America to me, it's just a faulty assumption,
Yeah.
right? Like, and even the way, if you have any sense of like internal dynamics of different communities, like the Caribbean politics of where I live in Brooklyn is very different than like Harlem, right? Like there's real, so, you know, and obviously the age gaps in terms of Bernie and Hillary tracked with everything else. And I, you know, in terms of young people of color voted
Yeah.
for Bernie and older people voted for Hillary, generally speaking. And now I think even with Kamala Harris, like I think one of the things that actually is a sidebar I think will be tricky for her just from observing her. I think she's a very appealing candidate in a lot of ways, but I think Obama through a really unparalleled charisma was obviously, he is a Harvard Law graduate. He is incredibly, you know, of a certain professional class and training, but he was very down to earth and very kind of globally relatable that I don't see Kamala Harris having. That's just more of a kind of stylistic critique. But my point being is like, it's faulty to assume that people of color would necessarily be to the left or that some communities wouldn't internalize neoliberalism just as much as everybody has internalized it. But that said, I mean, what, not from the community as a whole, obviously, but from a leadership class perspective, what does it mean that the pivot, even from figures like, I don't know, as with all their flaws, Jesse Jackson or Cornel West or Angela Walker or Angela Davis or Bell Hooks, who had, like, they have actual politics.
Yeah.
These are people with very serious politics, and they do see things in a synthesized way. And they did name check poverty and class, not just to include it in something to index, because they understood it. And now we're emerging with this that representation in terms of power and what's given a platform is becoming quite center right. And actually not only, you know, centering race, which is one thing, but actually saying, like you've been saying, that it is antithetical. You know, Amani Ghani, like it's sexist to support single payer healthcare, which by the way negates all of Barbara Lee's work in getting rid of the Hyde Amendment, right?
Yeah.
But wow. That kind of reactionary step is pretty extraordinary from people that are at least publicly branded and presented as you would represent a perspective that is a little bit more attuned to the needs of most people.
I think that so identity politics is an operation, but so is respectability politics. And I think that respectability politics plays a huge role in communities of color. I can speak particularly to the Black community. Even though we have had figures historically with a lot more political meat to them, obviously,
Right.
there is always this feeling that, well, this isn't going to be a real thing. They're not really credible. They're, you know, Jesse Jackson can run for president, but he's, you know, however Bill Clinton poo-pooed him, like that was the general feeling. You know, even when Obama started his run, no one really in the Black community took him particularly seriously because we are used to a history of kind of disappointment in this realm. And I think that when we see a candidate that seems actually viable, you know, someone who does have that Harvard Law degree or whatever else people are crediting, it's irresistible in a way that, you know, to credit the community is, I think it has a bigger draw on us than it would for a white voter, simply because we don't have those opportunities as frequently. Right. And I don't want to say that there's zero value to representation in the world. I think that its value is dwarfed by obviously like genuine political representation. But, you know, Obama was a symbolic victory. Obama did teach some people that Black people could be clean and articulate. Obama did inspire some little kid somewhere that they could shoot higher than, you know, whatever their public school teacher told them to do. And I think for so many, you know, we learned with Obama that was an achievable goal. Right. And now maybe someday a different kind of progressive candidate of color will come along and teach us that we don't have to compromise so much on our politics to also have pride and a sense of simpatico with our leaders.
It's a final question before we go to the postgame, and thank you for hanging out.
Yeah,
you're going to be able to take calls and IMs and, you know, mess around a little bit more. Do you think that I mean, I think that there's fluency that's kind of very broadly, even, in ways that can be kind of easy to make fun of. Like, here's the BuzzFeed listicle about like the 10 ways that the third season of Game of Thrones, like let down women or something, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying those conversations aren't valid, but I'm just saying like there is a very broad discourse with regards to gender and race. There's no discourse on class, and there's no discourse on class as either a category. Like for me, I hit the gender, skin color jackpot, sexual orientation jackpot, but I grew up really poor. That absolutely strongly influenced my perspective, my experience, and orientation to the world. And there's not even a semblance of recognition of the need for that kind of perspective in public discourse. And then secondly, the other way in which class is not just, and this is where I think the intersectional analysis kind of falls a little bit, is that class isn't just like another category of identity. It's literally a function of how economies are designed. And it's literally a way of thinking about how profits are made and how things are commodified and who benefits and who doesn't structurally, regardless of what people's brand preferences are, whether they drink beer or wine or anything like that, the terms that we like to think in. So I just think that if we don't center class, we're not going to be, not at the expense of anything else, but get people to understand the class discourse. We're never going to be able to achieve the types of things we're talking about. And what do you think is the method by which we can get that discourse out there?
I think about this a lot.
Yeah.
Because it has become apparent to me after years of kind of being that person who says, don't police my language and I can say mansplaining and all of this kind of stuff. I've come to the place where I don't think it's constructive. And that is not a popular
No.
That is not a popular view, and I'm still workshopping my feelings on this. So I'm going to reserve the right to revise my opinion here. But I was thinking just this morning about the ways in which we talk about race. I'm going to answer your question.
No,
but the
take
ways
your time. There's no rush here. Take your time. We have a very bright audience. They're interested in your thoughts.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about the ways in which we talk about race aren't necessarily aligned with what our end goals are. So I might think it's appropriate to say, you are in fact mansplaining to me, and mansplaining is a legitimate phenomenon that exists and it's a thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's overused, but sometimes it's properly applied. But if the result of me saying it to you in that way is for you to feel like you want to shut down and not engage in the conversation and not understand where I'm coming from, then it has marginal utility. So I've been thinking about how we talk about race and identity politics, and how white identity politics, right, the kind of things that we saw in Charlottesville a couple of weekends ago, isn't characterized as such.
But it absolutely is.
But it is absolutely the same thing.
Absolutely.
And how there are these kind of parallels between how liberals talk about race and conservatives talk about race. And so we'll say things like, they hate us and they just voted for Trump because they don't care about us, and they like either expressly want us to like die and genocide and like leave the country, or at very best they're indifferent to us. And on the other side, we hear, oh, they hate us, they want to destroy our lifestyle, they want to genocide us. Everything is about how white men are terrible, and so why should I care about them? And liberals, it's not the same. I obviously don't believe that each complaint is valid or similarly valid. But I do think that Democrats saying things like, oh, they don't have, like, they're coming from nowhere. They're coming from it's just racism, and it's who they are, and it can't be changed, isn't constructive to having the kind of conversation that both sides can listen to, which I think is where economic arguments have so much benefit. And the resistance that liberals have to not leading with race, I think, is well-founded. We have a history of political movements ignoring the ways that effects of social programs are disproportionate, and those are relevant. Right. But we've lost sight of the extent to which, the New Deal was poorly distributed. Was it better than not having a New Deal?
Right.
And I don't think it has to be all or nothing, but I do think that figuring out how to talk about economic justice and talk about racial justice without either seeming like that's what you're doing is the only way we're going to bridge this gap, where we live in a world where we've we've been told these things are mutually exclusive. And in truth, to make something seem like a racial justice argument does make it seem actually unappealing to a certain segment of the population. It's the let's not lead with the reparations argument, you know?
And I also think that regardless, I mean, to me, I think that we have to be like a vast majority, 98%, like people talk about this. I was talking to this German journalist the other day, and she was like, so who are these people that voted for Trump? And I said, they're Republicans. There's nothing complicated about this. That's how he won, right? Like, and Republican is the white identity party, and he won on white identity politics. And the only reason that's complicated is because we have idiots like Michael Kinsley, who I talked about earlier, who need to retire. But that said, so I have no interest in catering to those people or pretending that their beliefs are otherwise. But that said, the correct moral case and the Machiavellian strategic case that marginalizes that is economic.
Right.
And any answer to that from liberals that not only delegitimizes that, also is not serious about making sure that Jeff Sessions is never Attorney General again.
Right.
Because there's this other bizarre kind of liberal, like, oh, well, I'm willing to lose. And it's like, well, you know, I'm not. Because I know people that are actually quite deeply affected by all aspects of this. In fact, across the spectrum we talk about, whether it be class, race, gender, anything else. We must win these things, and we must implement an agenda that addresses all of this simultaneously in a synchronized way, or we're not moving out of this. Like the human project is not going to keep moving.
The irony was that's the argument that was used against us in the primary, right? Like, you're willing to tank the whole thing. You're a Bernie bro. You don't really care about the people. And there was no consideration of the people that are suffering under the status quo.
Absolutely.
Like, none.
None. And actually telling people that they're doing just fine. Look.
America's already great.
Jesus Christ. People still ask me. I have to be nicer to fucking Hillary Clinton. I told people to vote for her, for God's sake. I did tutorial. I could have been a better spokesperson.
My main Hillary
than all
hate
of her spokespeople
comes from the amount of time that we spent arguing with Bernie or Busters.
He was like, yeah, but what about
like
Trump?
all that stuff.
But I think that I read an account that Trump was super nice to black guys at a casino, and I think he doesn't want war. Not saying I like him.
I wake up reliving those calls.
It's fucking morons.
Oh,
Yeah, that was the
brutal.
worst. Oh, yeah. You can get into a real skewed YouTube world. Okay. Thank you to the first 580 members on Patreon. That is a great start out of the gate. We're only on a third week. There is 3 shows a week that you get. The post game, which we're about to jump to, the idea primers. We already have 3 this weekend: Silicon Valley fascism, Turkey's social media neo-authoritarian strategy, and a history of the third way. Working on, sorry?
Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel is very much in the Silicon Valley fascism one. And not doing the Peter Thiel voice was so difficult because it really isn't that kind of segment, but fuck, that was hard. And then there's the Discord chat. I do Q&As on there every couple of days. If you're at a $21 or above, you can do a monthly call with me. We're doing their first one this coming Sunday. There's going to be a morning brief that we're releasing on it. And, you know, follow me on Twitter at _Michael Brooks, but also follow at TMBS. At
TMBS FM.
TMBS FM, excuse me. Thank super producer Matt Luck and the Clutch. Like as an example, we just tweeted out a piece that Jean Bajlan, who's on Crew, and I wrote for Open Democracy about the next phase of the Turkish democracy movement. So there's a lot of things that you can find out and catch there. We're going to be back streaming in about 5 minutes. We're still figuring out all the YouTube stuff. Bear with us. Thank you so much, Patreons. Thank you, everybody who's written iTunes reviews. I'm going to say 90 of you because I didn't really like the 91st review that much, and I would like to see responses to it. Thank you to everybody watching on YouTube. I appreciate it. You're staying with me as we go into the post game. We'll be back with you all 646-257-3920. IMs are open. See you in the post game.